that if we adopt our bill, that there would have to be invasive screening procedures. In other words, this accusation that for any woman who was competing in athletics, they would have to be subjected to a physical examination. First of all, it's a red herring. It's stupid as all get out, and it's just absolutely not what has happened historically. But I would...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, this amendment certainly is germane. It goes to the heart of the evil bill that we are considering, and I strongly support it. The gentlelady from Wyoming talked about men competing in women's sports. Men do not compete in women's sports. Transgender women may compete in women's sports. It does no service to the truth or to human biology or understanding of human biology to maintain that there's no such thing as transgender women, or for that matter, transgender men.
What just happened in Congress was nothing short of explosive. Tempers flared, voices rose, and lines were drawn over one of the most controversial topics in sports and politics today: transgender participation in women's sports. A bill aimed at banning transgender women and girls from competing in amateur female sports has set off a firestorm in Washington. And whether you're for it, against it, or still trying to figure it out, you need to hear what actually went down. Let's break down the key takeaways from this high-stakes, emotional, and politically charged debate. This wasn't just a policy meeting, this was a political showdown. Congress members on both sides were fired up as they debated a bill that would ban transgender women and girls from participating in women's amateur sports. Some called the bill
any more than any of us asked to be born male or female. They just were born that way. And now we have this bill that wants to punish them for it. I strongly oppose the bill. I support the amendment. The amendment would require NGBs to commit to submitting annual reports to the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee describing the impact of prohibiting transgender women and girls from participation in amateur athletic competition on the participation of women and girls in those amateur athletic competitions. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I oppose this legislation in part because its blanket ban will harm all women and girls, in addition to all transgender women and girls. This blanket ban will likely subject all women and girls to unfair scrutiny of their gender identity, to physical inspections, if not lead to outright subjecting them to invasive screening procedures. It also would likely lead to increased harassment of any other person perceived by anyone as not conforming to harmful and discriminatory stereotypes based on some people's expectations of femininity. I have no doubt that this increased scrutiny and harassment will have a negative impact on all women and girls' participation in amateur athletic competitions. I think it important that the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee and the public be made aware of the costs imposed on all women and girls when transgender women and girls are targeted for discrimination. Should such an immoral, awful bill ever become law. While I still would not support the underlying legislation if adopted, I would urge members to support this amendment. It slightly improves an awful, evil piece of legislation. I urge the adoption of the amendment and the defeat of the bill.
The gentleman yields back. The question occurs. Oh, Ms. Jackson, I'm sorry. Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman can proceed.
And I like to yield time to Ms. Hageman from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. There is really no discussion so far on the actual bill. There's a lot of emotional language and a lot of accusations being made by my colleagues on the other side, but no discussion about the need for the bill that we are debating at this time. In terms of the amendment, I would like to point out to my colleague from New York, as he read the amendment, he actually changed the language of what is stated in the bill in order to make a point, because he recognized that the word that is in this amendment actually completely undermines every single thing that he said. According to the amendment, it would insert the line, commits to submitting annual reports to the corporation that include for each calendar year a report describing the impact of prohibiting a person whose sex is male from participating in an amateur athletic competition that is designated for females, women, or girls on the participation of females, women, or girls in that amateur athletic competition. So the very purpose of this amendment is to do a report on the impact of allowing men to compete against women, and have a requirement for that annual report. I think that I can tell you what that annual report would show, and that would be that every time that a man competes against a woman, or virtually every time, they're probably going to beat them. So I don't know that we need that report. I oppose this amendment for that reason alone, but I would ask that in the future, when you are reading the amendment, you actually read what is stated rather than what you wish was stated and then arguing against that. It's a classic straw man argument. On the other side, there had been discussion about invasive screening procedures, and that if we adopt our bill, that there would have to be invasive screening procedures. In other words, this accusation that for any woman who was competing in athletics, they would have to be subjected to a physical examination. First of all, it's a red herring. It's stupid as all get out, and it's just absolutely not what has happened historically. But I would point to the policy by the U.S. Boxing Association, which actually requires that very kind of screening. It must state that the boxer who transitions from male to female is eligible to compete in the female category under the following conditions. The athlete has declared that her gender identity is female and has completed gender reassignment surgery. I would assume that the only way they're going to be able to determine that is if they actually physically examine these people to determine whether in fact they have been castrated, which I find to be an absolutely absurd position to be taking by the Boxing Association. I would also say I do not need to be lectured by a man on the issue of protecting women and girls in sports or what a woman actually is. I know that. I know what a woman is. I do not need to be lectured that somehow by saying that men cannot compete against women, we are hurting women and girls. That is an insult to women and girls. It is an insult to me personally, that you believe that I am not capable of understanding the difference between women and girls and men and boys. I also believe that the entire argument is focusing not on the issue at hand, again, whether men and boys should be able to compete against women and girls in the Olympics, which is all that this bill does. I would ask unanimous consent to submit for the record the instances of men hijacking women's sports and the various examples that we have demonstrating not only the injuries that have been suffered by women as men have participated in girls' sports, but also the girls and women who have been affected by this, including Riley Gaines when Will Thomas decided to join the women's swimming team in Pennsylvania. Again, this bill
Without objection.
I object to concluding these mistruths in the record.
There's an objection.
Okay. I think that speaks volumes as well. If you do not want in the record the information about the impact that men are having on women's athletes, I would also ask for unanimous consent to submit to the record 3 articles, USA Boxing Slam for new transgender policy that allows biological men to compete against women.
Objection.
Boxing champs, Olympic gold medalist rip USA Boxing over transgender policy. Girls need to stick together. And USA Boxing codifies rule allowing male participation in women's division.
Without objection. Gentlelady's time.
Some called the bill inhumane and discriminatory. Others said it's about fairness, biology, and protecting women's sports. This wasn't a calm discussion. It was fiery, intense, and deeply divided. At the heart of it all was an amendment. Sounds harmless, right? Wrong. This amendment would require sports organizations to submit annual reports to the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, specifically tracking how banning transgender athletes affects participation among women and girls. Seems like a check and balance move, but it quickly became a lightning rod. Opponents said this targets trans athletes unfairly. Supporters replied, this just measures impact. Why are you afraid of facts? And that's when things got personal. Let's talk about the core arguments. Critics say it opens the door to discrimination, harassment, and invasive gender screenings, like physical exams to prove someone's gender. They fear it would discourage all women, not just trans women, from joining sports. Backers say it's about leveling the playing field. They argue that transgender women, born biologically male, may have physical advantages that are unfair in women's competitions. This wasn't just a policy disagreement, it turned into a full-blown culture war. And if you're finding this breakdown helpful, make sure to click that subscribe button. There's more context. Others said this isn't about identity at all, it's about biology. That sports categories exist for a reason, and ignoring biological differences hurts women and girls. So what's really on the table here? It's not just about track meets or swim teams, it's about who gets to participate, who defines fairness, and how far the government should go in legislating identity. This isn't just a bill. This is a battle over values, science, civil rights, and the future of competitive sports. Both sides feel passionately. Both believe they're protecting something important. But one thing's for sure, this debate is far from over. So now I'm throwing it to you. Should transgender women be allowed to compete in women's sports? Is this about fairness or exclusion? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and stay tuned, because this conversation is only getting louder, and we're going to keep breaking it all down, one debate at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.